All right, we're gonna go over mounting a red dot real quick. So first thing you'll need is a blaster with a Picatinny rail. If you don't have one, like this one does right here, if you are using like a Nerf Stripe or something else that doesn't have a Picatinny rail, you will need an adapter for one. I will put links to that down in the description. Second thing about red dots is I would definitely recommend buying something nicer than the cheapest one on Amazon. This one's still kind of cheap, but it's not the cheapest available. I'll put a link in the description box to some ones that I think are better options. This one holds 0, but it isn't the brightest, so it can be hard to see in sunlight. And finally, a lot of risers won't like angle down enough that you can actually get a good sight picture through an optic on a Nerf blaster due to how quickly the rounds from Nerf blasters drop, so you'll need some kind of angled riser. This is the kind I have. There's lots of others that are printable on Thingiverse, or you can get them on Worker or something like that. I'll put some links. So the first step in this is mounting our riser. We're just going to put this right here, line it up as far back as we can, because that's how I like it. You're free to line it up wherever on the rail you want, but personally I prefer to go as far back as I can. Let's grab my hex wrench real quick. Just tighten this baby down. So we want it to be tight, but not so tight that it breaks something underneath it or strips the threads out. That's going to be kind of a case-by-case basis, depending on what exactly kind of riser you're using and what screws it has. But they all more or less just tighten them until it's not easy to tighten them by hand anymore. They will probably be fine. These aren't firearms, so we don't need to use Loctite or anything like that, probably. Unless it's a particularly cheap optic or riser, which I don't recommend. So we got our riser on there now. This one in particular, let's see if I can find, there we go, has a 1 degree tilt downward on it, so that my optic will work with this blaster. I have already tested this optic with this blaster. It needs that 1 degree tilt to actually work. So now we're going to throw the optic on top of the riser. And same kind of deal. Right here, you can see our 2 screws. We got to tighten these guys down. Make sure when you're mounting the optic, you're mounting it with the view window facing towards you. If you mount it the wrong way, you'll get this reflective window here. You don't want that, because then you won't be able to see your dots. Just tighten this baby down here, just like the other one. And 2, okay. All right, cool. Now we got a red dot on here. So this particular model, it'll be different depending on which one you have. But in this particular model, you turn it on and off with these buttons. So you press the plus button to turn it brighter, and then the minus button to turn it less bright, and then hold the minus button to turn it off for about 5 or 10 seconds, I think. All right, cool. So now we got our optic turned on. We look down it, and a couple more comments on dots. I do not recommend the multicolored dot or multi-reticle dots. They tend to be not bright enough to actually see in daylight unless you spend a lot of money on them. Probably more than most people in this hobby are willing to spend on an optic. When you're screwing the dot to the rail, a torque driver spec torqued to the correct spec would be ideal. Most people in Nerf probably aren't going to have that, so if you don't, just use a hex wrench and tighten it until it's pretty snug, but you don't want to risk stripping out your screws. So when you go to fire and zero the optic, you're going to want to set a target up, ideally at least 10 yards away, but work with the space you have. And then fire a test group of 3 shots to see where your rounds are hitting compared to where the actual optic point of aim is. So once you've got that figured out, then you can adjust the optic turrets right here. And here on this one. Many of them will be more or less the same setup wise. They'll just maybe look a little bit different. But you see, this one moves the optic up, and this one moves it right or left, depending on how many clicks you turn it. Usually it's a quarter MOA, so a quarter inch at 100 yards. Some optics are half MOA per click, so you need to read your optic manual and see. A lot of handgun optics are 1 MOA per click. So just read your optic manual, figure out which one works for you, and adjust accordingly. So if you were to, for example, fire a group, and the center of your group is about 3 inches low and 3 inches right, that means you need to move the requisite number of clicks up and left. Again, depending on what kind of far per click your optic moves, you need to move that many clicks. You'll need to do that math. I'll put that formula up on the screen. Risers may be necessary for a lot of optics to get them low enough for a Nerf blaster to actually work with them. I will put in the link for one of those. Take your shots, do your math, adjust, and fire again. Or you could do what I usually end up doing and just firing a few shots, adjusting a little bit, and then firing again. Because it's kind of more fun that way to just shoot more. But, you know, do what works for you. I'm not your mom. Go ahead and repeat that process until your reticle, your dot reticle roughly meets your point of impact. It will never be perfect because this is Nerf we're talking about. But if you can get it pretty close at 10 yards or so, that's probably good enough for most Nerf engagements. Zero at another distance if you prefer, or if you have limited space, just do your best and confirm when you get to the field. Practice with your optics so you can quickly shoulder it and quickly fire it exactly where you're intending to point. So when you're taking a shoulder, you want to put the blaster into the meat of your shoulder pocket, come up, and then get right behind the optic with a cheek weld so you can actually see the dot in the optic, which I probably can't simulate with the camera very well because it is a camera and not an eye. But we're gonna see if we can. There we go. What your stance should look like. There we go. And practice at different ranges so you know where your holds are compared to your reticle. Like at 5 yards, where you point your reticle is going to be a little bit different for precision shots than where you point it at 20, for example, because the dart's going to drop either less at 5 yards or more at 20. Practicing will help you master that process, and it'll become nearly instinctual after a while.